and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about a DAC I have been using for almost a month now in my reference system, a digital to analog converter. Now a DAC is very important in a system, but that depends on how much resolution your system can pump out. Is your system a lo-fi system or a mid-fi system? If so, then the DAC doesn't make a huge difference. It can to some extent, but not like when you have a system that is built for resolution, for detail, for air, for that see-through transparency. When you have a high-end system with high-end speakers and amplification, a DAC can make a huge difference within that system. Now, back in the day, I'm talking like 30 years ago, maybe 25 years ago or so, I remember having a system in my basement, and all the rage at the time were certain CD players because of the DACs that they had built into them. At that time, I don't believe there were external DACs being made. At least if they were, they weren't something that most audiophiles knew about. At least I didn't know about them. So we found our DACs within CD players, right? So there was a Pioneer Elite player back in the day. It had the wood sides, the wood grain sides, and everybody said that that had such a musical DAC. I believe it was a Burr Brown DAC inside of that CD player. I managed to find a CD player, that CD player back then, and it really made a difference. And I just had a mid-fi system, but I was running, I think, a Sony CD player. I upgraded to this Pioneer that everyone said had such a great DAC, and it sounded so much better, so much more musical, a little bit warmer. So I knew back then that the DAC was important. Fast forward to 2021, and I have been trying out many DACs recently. In fact, I recently reviewed the Lampizator Amber 3 DAC over at my website. If you want to read that, I'll link to that in the description below. I think I wrote that review a couple months ago. The way time flies, it could be longer. It could even be a little shorter. I don't know. But I loved the Amber 3 DAC from Lampizator. It comes in, I think, at just over $5,000 today. It's a tube-based DAC, and it presented music in a human way, right? The way it presented the voice and the musical picture, it wasn't an etched-out detail kind of DAC. It was more of a, in my system anyway, a bigger sounding, larger than life, a little bit on the warm side kind of DAC. I really enjoyed it. It was a slow burn for me, meaning it took me a while to really fall for the Amber 3, but once I did, I loved it for the sound it brought to my system. I also have had a Chord Qutest for a long time. I will say that I recently sold that Chord Qutest, but the Chord Qutest is another DAC that I really enjoyed. It wasn't as full sounding, it wasn't as warm as that Lampizator, but what the Chord brought was layers to the music and texture to the music. And it had a way of presenting detail, at least in my system, with just enough oomph and grunt to make it sound really nice and really detailed without being thin sounding. Is one thing I don't like. It's DACs or any audio equipment that makes your speakers sound thin or flat or dull. I've been recently listening to, for the last month, the Denafrips Pontus II DAC. Now, Denafrips sent me this DAC out to see what I thought about it, and I said, well, I'll need a few weeks with it. I need to listen to it, because when I do reviews, I don't get a product in, plug it in, listen for a few hours, and come make a video talking about it. So I've been listening to it for a few weeks. In my reference system, I've compared it to the Lampizator Amber 3 and the Chord Qutest, and I have written a full review for the Pontus II over at the website, and I will post that link as well in the description below. So this video, I'm just going to talk about the DAC, what it sounds like, and if I liked it, right? So the Pontus II is unlike most other DACs on the market. A lot of DACs just use off-the-shelf chips from, say, Burr Brown, right? Sabre, right? There's a lot of different manufacturers of DAC chips. The Pontus II is an R2R ladder DAC. What you get in the Pontus is a totally different kind of architecture. Now, I pulled it up here. What is an R2R ladder DAC? It's on my phone. R2R digital to analog converter, or DAC, is a data converter which uses two precision resistors to convert a digital binary number into an analog output signal proportional to the value of the digital number. It's just a different way to decode that digital and bring it into the analog domain, which is the job of the DAC. Now, some have told me before I reviewed the Pontus that R2R ladder DACs are a little more detailed. They can be detail hounds. They can dig out every bit of information in the music. And once I put in the Pontus II DAC from Denafrips, but before I tell you about the sound, the build quality of this thing is absolutely stunning. It's 18 pounds. It's all metal. There's no bolts or screws hanging out anywhere. It's very smooth. It's very sleek. It's a nice small size. It feels like a brick, and the inside is beautifully done as well. This is actually one of the best built DACs I've ever come across. It equals the build, or probably actually best the build, of the PS Audio Direct Stream. Chord has a nice little chunky metal build as well, but it's a small guy. And without question, the build of the Pontus II on the outside, the casing at least, is much nicer than the very unattractive Lampizator Amber 3. But none of that really matters. All that matters is the sound. I just wanted to note that the build quality of the Pontus II is fantastic. So I use the Pontus II. I hook it up balanced to the Passlabs XA60.8s, the Passlabs XP10. I have it all hooked up with some Qutest clear reflection cables. When I took out the Lampizator Amber 3, which I was listening to when the FedEx guy dropped off the Denafrips Pontus 2, I immediately went, unboxed the Pontus, I put it in place of the Amber, and I was actually a little bit in shock. If you read my written review, that's exactly what I said in that review, because the sound was so different from the Lampizator. And that sound difference, it went from a smooth, big, more togetherness of a musical picture to a more wide open, more detailed, more clear, precise imaging, instruments hanging in the air. The decay was there, the air was there, the vocals were not as big as the Lampizator, but they were big, and they were clean, and they were smooth. And at first I was like, I am hearing the most detail I've heard from music probably ever, but at the same time, it's not thin, it's not bright, there's no digital hash or harshness, there's no grayness to the sound. It sounded a lot like a really high-end analog system, but with one little thing missing. The mid-range meat was a lot smaller at the time when I first plugged it in over the Lampizator, which had a big fleshed out mid-range. The Pontus II mid-range was nice, smooth, deep, but it didn't have that mid-bass that the Lampizator had. Now, when I talked to Denafrips, they said, let it run for 10 days, just leave it on. It's okay to leave the DAC on 24/7 and check in after 10 days. So what I did was I listened every day during that 10 days, because if there is going to be a difference in sound from a burn-in, which I know that's a controversial subject. Some people think it's our ears getting used to the sound, which I can go for that. And some people think it's the equipment burning in, which I can go for that as well. There's reasons to believe both. It might be a mix, a little bit of both. But I wanted to hear these differences if they were happening. So I listened every day, usually at night, when it was quiet in the house and it was dark, and I can just let all of that information come to me where I can hear what the DAC is doing in the system. I heard differences over those 10 days. Now, whether that was my ears or not, I can't tell you, but on the first few nights, it was a little thin in the mid-range. By night 6, it was fleshing out, and by 2 weeks in, I would say, it was the smoothest, most fluid, most beautiful sounding DAC I've ever heard. Now, I loved the Lampizator for its smooth, big sound, right? But it wasn't the last word in detail or soundstage. or even imaging. It's a different kind of presentation. I love the Chord for its little meatiness, its texture, right? But it didn't have the biggest sound stage either. It didn't have that decay in the instruments that hang in the air with those big, breathy vocals. As I listened longer to the Pontus II, I was just sitting there hour after hour, yes, hours in my listening spot, and I was in awe of what it was doing with my Klipsch La Scala speakers. The bass, the bottom end, which is not plentiful on the La Scala at all, we all know this, it's a mid-range centric speaker, but it seemed like there was an extra level of low bass, and it was detailed. When there was a song I was playing with a bass solo, a jazz song with a bass solo, the bass solo came out a little bit into the space, and it was so detailed, and it sounded just so right. And I would hear the drum cymbals in the back. Vocals, again, are warm, smooth. This is an amazing DAC for the money. Amazing DAC for the money. So much so that I wrote Denafrips and I said, can I buy the review unit? I just can't imagine taking it out. I love the looks of the DAC. I love the features of the DAC, the inputs, the outputs. I'm running it with a Lumen U1 Mini streamer with a AudioQuest Diamond USB cable into the Pontus II. Now there's all kinds of features on this DAC. There's a non-oversampling mode and an oversampling mode. I much prefer the DAC in non-oversampling mode. You lose out on a little bit of that extension, but in oversampling mode, it did seem a little bright on top with my Klipsch speakers. In non-oversampling mode, it is warmer, it's bigger, it's juicier, and it's smoother. It just sounds so good in that non-oversampling mode, and that is where I chose to leave the DAC. And in this system, with this DAC, the music just takes me to those places I want to be. If you have a little stress, or I have a little stress, I sit in that chair at night and I let it all out and my body relaxes, and that music just surrounds me with its beauty. And I believe music can heal us from within. That's why I am a music lover. That's why I love two-channel music, and that's why I take it so seriously. So I can highly recommend the Pontus II DAC. It's a beautiful piece of equipment, and one you should at least try in your system if you're looking for a DAC up to that $1,700 US price point. Heck, I'd say if you're looking to spend up to $5,000 for a DAC, be sure you do not count out the Pontus II from Denafrips. Now, they have their DAC under it, the Aries 2. They can go all the way up to the Terminator DAC, which is their uber high-end DAC. But I think that might bring, I don't know, I haven't heard it, but from what I've read, that might bring a little more detail, which is not something I would want in my system. The Pontus II walks a fine line. It has a way of bringing you all that detail and goodness and air and transparency. It's such a transparent DAC, and it does so without crossing that line and bringing it to you with brightness or edginess or harshness or it being flat or dull. It doesn't do any of that. It keeps it rich, smooth, exciting, toe tapping. It makes you want to get up and move. It fills the room. The sound stage is huge, as wide as it is tall and deep. It's great at imaging. This is the best DAC I have ever heard in my life, and that's why it's staying in my system. So if you like this review, thumbs up and subscribe. I have some cool speakers on the way from Fleetwood Audio. I'll be reviewing the DeVille speaker very soon. These are horn speakers as well, but these are really, really high-end, handmade, real wood, no MDF here, beautifully designed speakers, and look for that coming soon. It might not be till the first week of November that I post a review for them because, again, I have to let it all soak in. I have to, be sure of my evaluation before I tell you guys. So I take my time listening to these audio products. I love you all, I thank you all, and I will see you again soon.